Good morning and welcome to this morning's service.
Yeah. Good morning to those watching live on this wet Sunday morning, or those on catch-up. It's great to have you with us.
Yes, I'm Jen, and you are?
I'm Neil.
And it's great to have you with us today. We are looking at the last of our emotions. I don't know if that's what they actually called it, but I called it the emotions series.
Yeah, it's
not emoji, emotions.
Yeah, its title is Inside Out, and it's what's inside us and coming out and how it comes out. I think
I retitled it the emotions series.
Yeah.
We have done quite a few of them. This is our last one in the series, and Martin is bringing our talk this morning about joy and sadness. So not just dealing with one emotion, but the kind of opposite emotion.
Yeah, and if I got the idea right, it's not just about this is joy and this is sadness, but actually can you find joy in sadness, which is something that perhaps most of us think that's not possible.
It's quite difficult to do, and I think that's when we can get caught up in the emotion, because you're feeling sad, you don't feel happy. So it's working out the joy and the sadness. That's quite unusual. So let's find out about what the series is being on about with our little intro.
Do you ever look at somebody and wonder what's going on inside their head? For that matter, do you ever wonder what's going on inside your head? Join us this month as we look at how to ensure that the emotions inside of you don't get the better of you. We're looking at fear, anger, sadness, and joy, and we'd love you to be part of it.
So we are coming to the final part now of our Inside Out series. It's just been explained on the video what it is. Hi to everyone who's watching online. Great to have you with us. And really it's got the idea that we all of us have emotions. We feel things. We feel anger, we feel frustration, we feel happiness. And emotions are part of what it means to be human, and then they are good. But actually, sometimes they can be bad. And there's two ways they can be bad. Sometimes we can bottle it in until we get to the point where we implode and we damage ourselves. But also sometimes we can do the opposite. We can explode and we can damage other people. And really what we've been looking at in this series is what Becky called in the first part, the Goldilocks zone. Not too hot, not too cold, just right. And how can we manage our emotions to the extent where they're good for us? And as the video reminded us, we've been looking at fear, we've been looking at anger, and this morning we're going to be looking at sadness and joy. Sadness and joy, which I must admit has been a tricky thing to work out this week in the planning. But I just want you to take some time out now, just as we kind of come into this subject, to use your memory. And I want you to think back to times in your life when you have experienced joy. Have a think. When have you experienced joy? Birth, marriages, holidays. Just think, what comes to mind? When I was thinking about this, I was thinking about the time when I was dating my now wife. And we used to go between London and Ipswich. I was in Ipswich, she was in London. And I just loved that year that we spent dating. And it was just a wonderful time. And it fills me with joy when I think about it. Also, with the birth of my first daughter, when I held her in my arms when she'd just been born, and how heavy she felt. She wasn't heavy at all, but, it'd been a hard time for me. So she felt very heavy. When have you had experienced joy in your life? But now I want you to think a bit differently. I want you to think, when have I experienced sadness in my life? Death, struggles, stress. For me, what came to mind was when Jen was pregnant with our second child, Eve. And pretty early on in the pregnancy, she started bleeding. And it was touch and go throughout the whole pregnancy whether Eve would survive. And every time she bled, she had to spend time in hospital. And I remember that point when we'd been taken in on the ambulance and we're sitting in the hospital, and the doctor says, right, now it's a time when she would be viable, but actually she's probably going to be disabled. And how sad and scary that time was. Now, thankfully, Eve came out absolutely fine. She held on. She was a little bit early, and there was a few issues, but she's strong and healthy. But think back to those sad times in your life. See, sometimes looking back, we can think, if only I could get rid of all those sad times and just keep the joyful times. If only I could remove from my memory those times when life has been hard and a struggle and difficult and sad, and I can just keep those times in my life when I feel happy and there was joy and everything was good and the sun was shining, not like today where it's miserable. If only it could be summer and never winter. You want to wish away those sad times. And then sometimes it's easy to look forwards and say, if only I could skip those bits. We can become maybe fearful of times which we know are coming, which are sad. See, my wife loves to watch 24 Hours in A&E or Ambulance. She used to be an A&E nurse. It's just something she really loves. And I just sit there and I watch it, and they say things like, you never know what's around the corner. I'm there with people in the worst moments of their life. I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't want to have to think about these things. Who knows what's going to happen? And I just want to avoid that. I just want to keep all the joy and get rid of all the sadness. There's a film that came out a few years ago called Click. I don't know if any of you have seen it. It's not a particularly well-known film. It's starring a comedian called Adam Sandler, who I don't particularly like, so I wouldn't recommend him. But the film had a serious message. It basically followed a guy who was living the American dream. He had a family. He was a successful architect. And his TV remote control goes wrong. And he goes off shopping to buy a new remote, a universal remote for his TV. But what he gives is given by some strange bloke, is a universal remote control that doesn't just control his TV, but it controls his life. And it enables him to fast forwards through all the bits he doesn't like. So his body kind of goes onto autopilot and just carries on through life, but his mind disengages from reality and then clicks back in again when they press play on a remote. It's not a true story, by the way. See, what he does is every time life is boring, every time he's feeling impatient, every time he's feeling sad, any time life gets difficult, an argument with the wife, difficult children, he presses fast forwards. And really what you see in the film is he ruins his entire life because he just disengages from life. See, there is sad bits in life. There are joyful bits in life, but that is life. That is what life is like. There is the mundane, there is the exciting, there is sadness, and there is joy. There are ups and downs. But I think what we need to take grasp of at the beginning of this talk is it's those ups and downs that create the person that we are. They kind of give a third dimension to what would otherwise be a very flat personality. It's those sad times and those joyful times that mature us. But my question, and this has been the question of the series, is how do we get that Goldilocks zone where in particular those sad times don't damage us, but instead help us to be mature and a better, more well-rounded person? Oh, I just realised I've got the clicky thing. Yeah. How are we getting on? Oh, there we go. Oh, that went twice. I made a mistake. His name is Dr. Kate Fowler, not Fowler. Never mind. She says this. It says, the world is jolted by events that are wonderful and terrible, and gorgeous and painful. I'm only pressing it once, and it's going absolutely mental. Yes, if you could click on forward, please. I can't reconcile the contradiction, except that I am beginning to believe that these opposites do not cancel each other out. Life is beautiful, and life is so hard. Life is beautiful, and life is so hard. This kind of echoes some words from Proverbs, which I think is on the next thing. Proverbs is a book in the Bible, and it's a collection of wise sayings from a father to a son. Now, some of them don't make a lot of sense to us because it's written a few thousand years ago. We don't quite understand it. But the reality is human beings have not changed in all that time. And the wisdom there is very much still wisdom now. And it says this: even in laughter, the heart may ache. At the end of joy may be grief. See, joy and sadness are not mutually exclusive. They can actually be at the same time. They can operate at the same time. That we can find sadness in our joy, and we can also find joy in our sadness. I'm going to pick up that a little bit later. But I'll go back to the question: how do we get it so that these sad times and these joyful times work together to create who we are in a positive, healthy way without just messing up our lives completely? And I think I just want to highlight something that a temptation that we have when we try and manage our lives is to fake it till you make it. I don't know if you heard of that phrase, fake it till you make it. In other words, pretend to be what you want to be until you are like that. If you want to live a life which is positive and happy and full of joy, well, just act that way, regardless of the situation, regardless of what is happening to you, just act like that. It's kind of a false optimism about life. It's a happy facade that hides the difficulties that we might be facing in our lives. We do that in social media. That's the whole thing about social media stuff. But in reality, we don't just do it in social media, we do it in our social circles as well. How are you doing today? Yeah, I'm all right. You sure? Okay. Yeah, fine. Actually, we know that we're not fine. We try to hide the difficulties and the sadness that we are facing. Christians, if you're a Christian here, I'm looking at you because we're not that much better, really. How many times have you gone up to someone struggling, and they say, no, everything happens for a reason. God is good. I give thanks in every circumstance, which is technically true, but actually all you're doing is pretending that everything is okay when it really isn't okay. There's a mega church pastor called Joel Osteen, who you may have heard of. He leads the biggest church in America. And he wrote a book, and it's a saying which has really been picked up by the world, really, is your best life now. Live your best life now. Live the life that you want to have. Be positive. Use the power of your positivity to bring into being the joyful life that you want to experience. And because of that, sometimes sadness and not being right and not being okay can become a kind of unofficial sin. And we think that somehow we can manage our life so that we can get rid of all bad stuff. But the reality is that sometimes in life there is no silver lining. Sometimes in life, things cannot be fixed. Sometimes in life, plans do go wrong and stuff happens. And we don't get to choose between what we like and what we don't like. There is no reason to fight. And we cannot find strength within ourselves. Sometimes sad times are sad. And there's nothing we can do. We can't manage our life to avoid those things that just come out of nowhere, like on 24 Hours in A&E, that just wipe us out. and feel sad. And bottling it in and hiding it is going to do more damage than good. I want to read you a quote from the Simply Health blog, which was written last year. It says, from financial worries to work issues, men's propensity, not just men, but is in particular, and I'll come to why in a minute, men's propensity to bottle things up and a culture of toxic masculinity have enabled this silent but deadly killer to continue to take the lives of men all around the world. See, the biggest single killer of men under the age of 45 is suicide. The biggest killer of men under the age of 45 is suicide. And this blog here is saying, who are a charity that work with mental health and men, is saying it's caused by bottling it up and not talking about it, not admitting it, and trying to project some sort of facades that says you're all okay. I mentioned that quote earlier from a Dr. Kate Fowler, not Fowler. This is a picture of her here. She's a Canadian. She's a Christian. She's very successful. She has a lovely family. You can see there a husband who she fell in love with age 14, school sweetheart, a young child. She's a successful speaker, sought after all around the world to come and speak. And we can look at the facades, the outward appearances, and go, wow, I would love to have her life. She has everything that I want in my life. But that's just a facade. Actually, when she was age 35, she was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. Incurable. And she was told, there is nothing we can do. You're going to die. Now, she went out of her way to try and get as much help as she can. She went in for a new trial, and it's actually managed to make her not better, but sustain her life. She's now 42, I think. And although she's still alive and still able to do many things, her life is very much in the balance. She's not cured, and she has to constantly live with that death hanging over her. And what do I do with my child? She writes letters to her 5-year-old child just to show to him, how important he is to her, because she knows that she probably won't be there when he's older. And all that he will have are those letters from his mother. But she would argue, actually, you can still find joy in amongst the sadness. Because otherwise, if you're in a situation like that, if you can't find joy in the sadness, you might as well just die now. What's the point? But actually, there is a point. We're going to look at Philippians chapter 1. If you've got a Bible, it's in the New Testament, and it's one of the letters that a guy called Paul wrote to the church in Philippi. And at the end of that letter to the church in Philippi, he says these words. He says, rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Rejoice. Be joyful all the time. And we think, well, how on earth can we be joyful all the time? How can we rejoice? And it becomes even more troubling and problematic when we realize the context of this. So Paul was a guy who was going around trying to build the church. He was going around preaching about Jesus and telling people about Jesus. And this got him in a lot of trouble. And what we see in here is him at the end of a journey where he had been beaten. He had been accused of wrong things. He had been shipwrecked a number of times. I think he needs to choose his boats better. And on this court case, it's ended up with him being in Rome, in house arrest, unable to have freedom. And what we need to realize is that we know what happens to Paul. He ends up being executed. So life is not going well for Paul. And yet he says these words to the Christians in Philippi and to us as well. Rejoice in the Lord always. But we're going to look at the beginning of the letter in chapter 1 and verses 12 to 21. And I want to just draw out some practical points, really, about how we can attempt to be joyful despite sadness. So I'm going to read to you and just draw those things out. So verse 12. Now I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. Now she's talking to brothers and sisters. What we do realize when we read Paul's letters, because we've got quite a few of them, he had a big network of friends. He had strong relationships. He had people coming to stay with him, to look after him, to help him. And he refers to often a lot of these people by name. And he's very honest with the way he is feeling, the struggles he has in his letters. And that's one of the first practical points. You need relationships to be able to sustain you through sad times. If you want to experience joy in difficult times, you need those relationships. You need those people that you can share your difficulties and your struggles with, those people that you can be honest with. I'm not saying that you bump into someone in the street and they say, how you doing? You just let it all out. That's not necessarily appropriate, but you do need to have people. And maybe for you, you might think, actually, I just need to pay for that. I need a counselor I can go to, and that is absolutely fine. But you need someone you can be open and honest with. And you need relationships that will help you support in time of trouble. Paul had that. Now, I want you to know, brothers and sisters, as what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. As a result, it has become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I am in chains for Christ. And because of my chains, most of the brothers and sisters have become confident in the Lord and dare all the more to proclaim the gospel without fear. See, what is Paul doing here? He's in chains, probably not literally, but he's got a guard, he's in house arrest, imminent execution. What is he seeing here? What he's seeing here is the positive, the good in what is a bad situation. He has a positive outlook on life. He's going, well, I may be stuck, but actually this has really emboldened all the believers out there to go and preach the gospel. Isn't this amazing? So he has a positive outlook on life. He looks for the goods in life. Let's carry on. It is true that some preach Christ out of envy and rivalry, but others out of goodwill. The latter do so out of love, knowing that I am put here for the defense of the gospel. The former preach Christ out of selfish ambition, not sincerely supposing they can stir up trouble while I'm in chains. So stuff is going on here. There's some political stuff going on. But he says in verse 18, what does it matter? The important thing is that in every way, whether from false motives or true, Christ is preached. And because of this, I rejoice. I have joy. What has Paul got here? What Paul has got here is a higher purpose to his life. He's got something that's more important than just him. And our higher purpose varies depending on all of us. It might be our family. It might be our friends. It might be the environments. Actually, if you want to be able to still experience joy in sad times, you need to have something which is bigger than yourself and your circumstances that you can see positivity in. For Paul, that was preaching the gospel of Jesus. That despite him being where he was, he saw how fruitful his ministry was being and how the gospel of Jesus was still being preached. Let's carry on. And yes, I will continue to rejoice. For I know that through your prayers and God's provision of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, what has happened to me will turn out for my deliverance. Let's just look at that word deliverance for a minute, because what we could think of, okay, he's in Rome, he's imprisoned, and what he's hoping for is the Salvation Army going to swing in on ropes and rescue him from captivity, and he's going to escape, and everything's going to be okay. Well, let's just read on. Because it's actually the word here is not so much deliverance, but it's salvation, being saved. And he describes this as, I eagerly expect and hope that I in no way will be ashamed, but will have sufficient courage so that now, as always, Christ will be exalted in my body. He's hoping that he's not going to show himself up, but he's going to have the courage and the strength to continue to live as a follower of Jesus, whether by life or by death. For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. See, Paul is not putting his hope in someone rescuing him from prison. He is putting his hope in something which goes beyond life. Can you put the next slide up? So the four things we get here: relationships, having people we can enjoy life with, but also share life with. A positive outlook, look for the good things. A higher purpose, something in your life which you can look to and work towards that is beyond just yourself. And those three things are all things that is good to build now when things are okay. It's no good trying to do that when everything goes wrong. It's about building good habits now so that you automatically start looking for the positive despite everything being messed up. Relationships, positive outlook, higher purpose. But for Paul, his key thing that gave him joy was that he had hope beyond this life. See, at the beginning I said joy and sadness are not mutually exclusive. They are not opposites. See, the opposite of joy is not sadness, it's hopelessness. The opposite of joy is not sadness, it is hopelessness. And if you are a follower of Jesus Christ, I want to say to you that you have hope. Not that everything will be all right in this life, not that you're going to be cured of every illness, not if you just think positive enough that you will have the life that you want, but ultimately you have hope because Christ died for you. You have received deliverance because Christ died for you. As I come to an end now, I want to read to you these words from Isaiah chapter 53. And this is written by a prophet, Isaiah, to a nation who were in sad times. Jerusalem, their city, had been destroyed. They'd been taken into exile. Life is rubbish. But they look forward to a hopeful future. And they look forward to a man of sorrows, a man of suffering that Isaiah describes here. It says, he was despised and rejected by mankind. A man of suffering and familiar with pain, like one from whom people hide their faces. He was despised, and we held him in low esteem. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering, yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. See, joy is our response not to our present circumstances. It just doesn't make sense to be joyful. Oh, great, excellent, I've got cancer or whatever. It doesn't work. That's nonsense. Joy is not our response to our present circumstances, but to our faith in Jesus. A faith that can be believed and hoped in, and yet is unseen. That is how Paul is able to say, rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice, because he had that hope. And you can have that hope too. And in a moment, I want to pray for you. I'll just leave you with these words that we're going to be singing, or we're going to have sung to us in a moment. On that rugged cross, my salvation, where your love poured out over me, now my soul cries out, hallelujah, praise and honor unto thee. Let's take a moment just to respond to some questions that will appear on the screen. Do you look on the bright side of life? How can you start to look for the good in life? Where do you find purpose? Read 1 Peter 1 verses 8 to 9. Do you want to be filled with inexpressible and glorious joy?
Wow, there was some challenges there, wasn't there? I think you can. Yeah, I think I was quite struck by the lady, Dr. Katie
Bauer, I think.
Bauer,
Bauer,
yeah.
I think, yeah.
Again, I can't
Yeah,
see the screen,
yeah.
but yeah. So I just was really struck by her story and that sort of external. I think we often see people's external facades,
Yeah.
don't we?
Yeah.
And that everything seems to be going smoothly, everything seems to be going well. And we don't know. And I think there's a lot being going around in social media and stuff about being kind regardless.
Yeah.
Because you
Yeah.
don't know what people are
Yeah.
walking through, because
Yeah.
often they don't give you everything. People don't share everything. And
Yeah.
it's that actually we've got the learning to be kind, because you don't know what's going on behind the surface.
Absolutely, yeah.
Mm.
And people do live their lives more and more on social media, and on social media we tend to put down the happy times, and
Yeah,
you
I
know,
think we do present our
and
facade a different way,
and
don't
sometimes
we?
we don't always live our true lives on social media. And I really like this idea that joy is not dependent upon your circumstances.
Yeah.
The idea that you can be sad, you can be in difficult times, but you can still be joyful, which is a difficult thing. And
we get caught up on the emotion bit, don't we?
Yeah.
We get caught on what is the circumstances making us feel like.
Yeah.
And I think you bring it up on the fact that happiness is very much dependent on what you're living through. And so when you don't feel happy, you don't feel like you're feeling joy.
Yeah. So I guess the Christian message is, and I've written this down as I'm going to read it. So joy is dependent on knowing who Jesus is, whilst happiness is dependent on what's happening around me. And as Christians, we believe that if you want to know real peace or real joy, that is long lasting, that isn't temporary, that isn't dependent upon your circumstances, then it's knowing Jesus.
Yes.
And that's the Martin from message. The message from Martin.
The Martin from
the
message.
Martin from message. Even the message from Martin this morning. And I like the line that real joy is dependent upon hope, and that hope is in
and
Jesus.
I like the fact that he picked out that sadness is not the opposite of joy, as in it's not the thing.
Yeah.
It's hopelessness.
Yeah.
That is opposite to joy. It all robs you of joy, actually. It robs you of joy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So we're just going to look at one of those questions in particular. How can you start to look for the good in life? And without it being fake, because I think Martin touched on the bit about, yay, I've got cancer, which is not what you're going to do.
No.
And all that whole I mustn't share my burdens. So therefore, if somebody asks me how I am, I'm going to be like, everything's great. I found the joy in life. It's not going to work, is it? It's not going to be floating as true. So how do we start to find the good in life? I think it's quite a tricky one, actually. I think there are there's lots of techniques out there. I think for me, I had a difficult couple of weeks at work, if I'm honest, and I was preparing for something that we do on Friday nights, and with myself and Martin, and I was like, what should I do? What should I do? Because I'm not feeling it. Because I was wrapped up in my feelings, so I was not feeling it. And I really felt like, actually, for me, what helped me through that was to just know that for me as a Christian, that God is bigger than all of it. So it's like, actually, it doesn't belittle what you're going through, but we've got something that is bigger for us that can walk alongside you and help you through. So that for me helped me to lift me up out of that feeling of where I wasn't feeling particularly happy. I suppose.
Yeah. And it is that, if we believe that Christ is with us, and it's like having that close friend who's sharing that circumstance with you. So it doesn't take the circumstance away, and you can still have a rubbish week, and you can still have deadlines you can't meet, or whatever goes on at your work or at home or whatever. But it is that knowledge that Jesus goes with you, and you can try and take maybe that step back, and just look at it in a slightly different way. Doesn't necessarily change the situation, but maybe just changes
your perception of the situation, or how you can get through that situation.
No, very much so.
Because I think you can look back in life and you've been through situations and you've got through them. And sometimes that's a really good way of finding the good in life, is actually, well, I did go through some really hard situations, but I got through them and I've come out the other end. They've made me who I am today, and I don't, and maybe that's a good thing. So I know it can be a tricky one. So bit of a challenge there. So how can you start to look for the good in life? Also, for your next steps, we were thinking it'd be really good so there's two things here. There's finding somebody you trust. So I think Martin touched on that in his talk. Finding somebody you trust who you can be real with to help you in your situation, whether that be good, bad, indifferent, that you can be who you need to be with somebody so that they can help shoulder that time with you and walk with you. And particularly if you are, as Neil has just said about true joy is found in Jesus, then maybe somebody, if you're searching for those questions or searching for who is this Jesus and what do I need to find out about him, maybe it's trying to find somebody who has that faith in Jesus that can help you understand what that means and what that looks like. So finding somebody, and then you've said about reading the Bible. Yeah,
I mean, if as Christians we believe that Jesus is the person that can give us that long-lasting joy, not moments of high happiness and then depths, to know that sort of peace and joy. If we believe that Jesus is the person that provides that, then I guess our next steps is to go and find, whether we're a Christian or not, really.
Absolutely.
It's just to find a little bit more. How can we learn to know Jesus better? And one idea you say is to go and speak to somebody who knows Jesus and to be honest with them. The second thing is we have the Bible, and there are some great passages in the Bible, and we were talking about that passage in Romans chapter 5, which because I haven't got my glasses with me, I'm going to ask you just to read. Just
pass over his phone.
Just pass over my phone, and
I'll find the right bit. Hang on a minute. No, you've gone on to Romans 6.
Oh, sorry.
He's been fiddling with his phone.
Yeah,
there we go. So, not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings. That's very much about what Martin was talking about. Yeah. Not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, character, and character hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us.
So we'd ask that if you've got questions, if you thought about this and you've got questions, there's an email address, gotquestions@hawleybaptist.org.uk.
Will pop up any moment.
Yeah, just fire a question in there. If you agree with what we've said, if you disagree with what you said, if you don't understand what we've said, then we'd love to hear from people, and please do put a question in there.
Get the conversation going.
And